What's the most out-of-touch thing you heard from rich people? Living outside Jackson Hole, this sister of a friend told me how hard it is to live there. You have to fly in your help, cleaning yard work, from Salt Lake. I had no words. Back when I was in my early 20s, my beat-up old car broke down in my job's parking lot when I was about to drive home. I was getting paid $10 an hour as a pastry chef at a catering company. This was barely enough to cover my rent. I was obviously pretty distraught over my car dying. My boss, company owner, ended up saying to me, "Why are you so upset? It's just a car. Just buy another one." I couldn't even respond. I just looked at her like she was crazy. I occasionally drive minibuses for a private school in the UK, have overheard some very privileged conversations from the students, but one that sticks out is, a tutor on the bus asked a student what he says when other students make comments about the very expensive watches he wears to school, to which he said his response is, "My dad has the same 24 hours as your dad." He then proceeded to go on about how his dad inherited a massive entertainment chain and various hugely successful companies from his grandfather. "It's just so easy to just drop $1,000 at Target, you know?" My Starbucks coworker in Calabasas, Kardashian land, after he spent $983 on toys for his 4-year-old nephew's birthday. I don't know why he worked at Starbucks, except maybe his rich family finally forced him to get a job. During the pandemic, senior management held company-wide calls about mental health and well-being. One piece of advice always stuck with me. They suggest to stop the tedium of working in the same space, to move your desk to another room in your house. I had a choice between facing different walls. How could your family accountant let that happen? When talking about how growing up, we couldn't pay the bills and had our water electricity shut off multiple times. A coworker asked me what bank I used for my safe deposit box. I said I didn't have a safe deposit box. She said, "But where do you keep your jewels then?" Edit. I said I didn't have any jewels and she just said, "Huh," and changed the subject. I actually get the sentiment. If I owned anything expensive, I would probably also have a safe place for it. But something about it made her sound like a Disney villain, even though she was a very nice person. It's a very vivid random memory. Thanks, OP. Not understanding why we didn't get more than one gift on our birthdays and Christmas. It was usually clothes. My mom never let us believe in Santa. She always said it was a game people play. Once when I was a little older, I asked why, and she said that before I was born, she taught kindergarten at a school with massive income inequality in Texas. Every single January, all the rich kids would come back from Christmas break, bragging about all their presents, and all poor kids would come back crying, because they couldn't figure out what they'd done that was horrible enough to put them on Santa's bad list, because he'd skipped their house again, just like he did every other year. That changed my entire perspective. Santa is supposed to give presents to good kids and skip bad kids' houses, but if you believe that, then by default, all rich kids are automatically good and all poor kids are automatically bad. Company event where people with investment properties told us that you just need to save hard to get that deposit. Just don't go out to dinner with your spouse as much, or just go to the pub every other Friday. Ah yeah, so reducing restaurant dinners from 0 to 0 and the pub tab from 0 to 0. Still broke. My colleague left the Zoom midway through if it was in person. He would have broken the door on the way out or came across the conference table at them. My boss at the time made between 5-10x more than I did. We were talking about big purchases like a car or house, and he says something along the lines of, "Well, you'll get a great deal since you'd all cash purchaser." I just kind of smile and nod, knowing that on my salary that he was aware of, I was not even an all-cash purchaser of groceries. While working for a valet parking service in the Santa Barbara area years ago, a woman hired us for a jewelry showing she was having at her giant house in Montecito. And while we were waiting for guests to arrive, my boss informed me that when the guests get in their cars to leave, that I needed to be sure to close their car doors or else they would just drive off with their doors open, as they're so used to people closing their car doors for them. I needed a bicycle to get to a new job. Found someone online selling a really nice bike for cheap, so got in touch. Took 2 trains to their house to buy the bike, and when I got there, it was a mansion. The bike was in a garage full of supercars and classics. They asked me where my truck was to load the bike on. When I told them I was riding the bike home, they laughed, and before I knew it, everyone in the house had been called to the garage to hear how I was riding the bike 3 hours home in the dark. No one offered me a lift. They just acted blessed at how they didn't have to do such things. I was a live-in super of a Baildige in Boston. The Baildige was 43 units, 40 were college kids. One year, a young girl moved in next to me, and 3 months later her electricity was shut off. She started pounding on my door, demanding that I turn her electricity back on. I checked her circuit breakers. They were fine. Went into her app and immediately noticed the pile of electric company mail on her table, with big red letters, "Last warning. Me. You didn't tell the electric company that you were the new tenant." Tenant. What's the difference? Why do they need to know it's me? Me. They need to send you a bill for electricity usage. Tenant. Now I know you're messing with me. You don't pay for electricity. She moved out 2 days later of embarrassment, her parents having to pay for breaking the lease. She couldn't look at me for those 2 days. I'm a type 1 diabetic and medical costs are insane without insurance. This happened in 2012, when the ACA bill was going through Congress. My boss was against it, and I told him how getting on insurance would help me. He grimaced and said, "That is your responsibility. You should get a job." I worked for him and he made sure to not provide benefits for the employees. Rishi Sunak, British Prime Minister for the moment, is stinking rich and grew up in a pretty affluent family. Went to a leading private school, Winchester, and Oxford. Doing the interview rounds in the current election campaign, he was pressed by an interviewer about whether his family had ever had to give anything up. After much umming and ahhing, the only thing he could come up with was Sky TV, a British satellite TV service. He was lampooned for days about that one. He really is a colossal twat. Used to travel for a glamping company, Glamour Camping, where we would set up huge canvas tents for fancy weddings and parties. We woke up real early one morning to a bunch of calls from some rich LA socialite about how the tents were wet. No other explanation. We rushed over and it turns out she had no idea what the concept of condensation in the morning was. "I can't control nature. Sorry, lady, you're not getting your deposit back." I work for a startup based out of San Francisco. I'm a remote employee halfway across the country, and am therefore a sort of second-class citizen. My direct peers who work in SF make at least double what I do, and they almost all had extremely privileged upbringings. They went to top 10 business schools. They summer in Tahoe, that kind of thing. I was in the home office a few months ago for our annual kickoff meeting, and one of the speakers polled the room. "Has anyone here worked at Amazon?" Nobody raised their hand. "Wow, I'm surprised." I said, "Does warehouse count?" And the entire room erupted in laughter. For certainly, I just told a very enjoyable joke. I want to say 12 or 13-year-old son of one of my clients literally expressed confusion to me when I asked them where I could get more paper towels from when they ran out in the washroom of his parents' however many million-dollar yacht. He said something like, "It's always there, what do you mean?" He was so disconnected from the process of, I guess, cleaning and restocking that he just thought that stuff would always be there and never run out LOL. The look of genuine confusion on his face was just something else. That's not the first time I experienced that either. Talking to the kids of extremely wealthy people is always a trip. How do you only have one dishwasher? Imagine their shock when I told them the apartment that I had just moved out of, that I lived in for 14 years, didn't have one at all. Thank you for watching this video. Write your comments and don't forget to subscribe.